Today, I'm hoping to be blown away by a tool brand that I've been really impressed with, as they just released 4 new tools that are meant to compete with the American big dogs of woodworking. This brand, Goingmake, continues to produce innovative tools with new features and upgrades to tool designs to not only make woodworking more efficient and accurate, but also more safe. And because this brand is made in China, the time might be right now to get a hold of these tools before prices skyrocket. You know, I heard old Donnie's even introducing a 30% tax on shredded cheese. It's all part of his plan to make America great again. So let's see if Goingmake can continue its trend of tool innovation with its 4 latest releases. I really wish I could find more issues with this Chinese brand, but every time I dive into one of their new tools, I find more reasons to trust the quality and craftsmanship of this Goingmake brand. But today we're looking at some big dogs, tools you just can't afford to have just a little bit off, as they're the cornerstone of accuracy and precision in your woodworking projects. So let's dive right in and take a look at our first tool, which is an essential table saw accessory. That reminds me, did you hear about that lady on the other side of town that backed into a table saw? Yeah, disaster. This is the much anticipated Goingmake Miter Gauge. Let's check it out. Before we dive into the tool itself, let's first take a look at its packaging. As we open the box, you can really see the attention to detail here, as everything has its own spot and is secure inside the packaging. But let's toss the box and see what comes inside. Surprisingly, most of this tool comes pre-assembled and there's not a lot of pieces here. Out of the box, you're going to find the fence itself along with a clamp handle. You'll also find the gauge body, a flip stop, and some hardware and the instructions. And because there's so few pieces, assembly really isn't that difficult. The first thing that we'll do is we'll install the clamp handle into the gauge body. Once the handle's installed, we'll loosen up the 2 knobs and back to loosen up the T-bar. Then we can slide the fence on using the T-track. Once that fence is loosely into place, we'll take the stop block, loosen the knob, and slide it into the T-track. And with all of these pieces loosely attached together, we have a rough assembly. And did you notice we didn't use any tools? But we need to talk about calibration. To do that, we need to go over to the table saw. Now this miter gauge accommodates a 3/4 inch miter slot, and I'll put the dimensions right here so that you can see if it will fit your table saw. Now right out of the box, my miter gauge doesn't have a whole lot of slot, but there is a little. Luckily, this miter gauge can accommodate for that. If we look at the miter bar, you'll see that there's 3 plastic washers. These can be adjusted with a hex key by simply turning them and tightening the fitness of the miter bar. Once you have the 3 washers in front tightened up, you can lastly tighten up the 1 washer in back. With our miter bar now securely in place, we can now work on calibrating our fence. To do this, we first want to raise the blade of our table saw. With the blade now raised, we now want to take the fence and slide it over until it's about 1 to 3 millimeters away from the blade. That's about 3/32 in freedom units. So I'll just slide the fence over using a setup block. And with the fence in place, we can lock it down with the 2 silver knobs in back. Now that our fence is locked into place, we'll take our stop block and slide it over until it touches one of the teeth of the blade. Then we can lock the stop in place with the silver knob on top. And with everything locked into place, it's now time to set our 0 point on this miter gauge. To do this, we're simply going to twist the knob on the side of the miter gauge. By rotating the knob, you can move the red indicator left or right until it hits exactly 0. And just like that, your miter gauge is completely calibrated. With all of that easy calibration done, we need to take a look at some of the amazing features of this miter gauge. Let's first take a look at the scale. If we look at the markings on the gauge, you can see there's easy to read markings with white writing on a black background. And whether you use imperial or metric, this gauge can handle it. As you'll see, it has imperial markings on the top and metric on the bottom. And with the gauge as is, you can make cuts from 0 all the way up to 19 3/4 of an inch. But this gauge has even more capacity, and that's because it has an extension wing. By loosening the silver knob on back, you can extend the wing. And to be able to use the stop in combination with the extension wing, it's a pretty simple process. All you need to do is to ensure that your stop readout is set to exactly 500 millimeters. Then you can lock your stop to your extension wing using the silver knob on top. Now instead of using your stop readout, you're going to transfer your measurements to the miter gauge readout. And this readout, once again, has imperial on the top and metric on the bottom and can extend your reach up to 36 inches wide. And if we lock the extension arm in place with one of the 2 knobs in back, you can see we can get exactly 36 inches. But believe it or not, that's not the only stop on this miter gauge. Let's slide the extension arm back and take a look at the other one. There's a hidden stop incorporated into the fence of this tool. Let's grab an Allen key so that we can see how it works. At the bottom of the fence, there's a little stop that you can flip into place or slide it back when not in use. And this stop can be adjusted left and right by using the Allen key to loosen it up and tighten it down. And this little stop can be great when you need to maintain a consistent cut when you're going back and forth between measurements. But let's take a deeper dive into the main stop block, as this is the one you'll primarily use. This block is by far the best stop block I've ever used, with absolutely no play once the stop is engaged. And this stop has 3 configurations that you can use. Let's take a look at the first one. The first one is the one that we just saw, where the stop goes right up against the fence and is perfect for crosscuts. Next up, the stop block also comes with a small pin. If we look at the block, you can see there's 3 holes that this pin can be screwed into. And with the pin in place, it can be perfect for cutting pieces that are already mitered. And lastly, this stop also has a wide base attachment. By screwing this foot on, you get just a little bit more support for some of your larger pieces. And last but not least is something that I've personally never had on a miter gauge stop, and that's the ability to make micro adjustments. Let's take a quick look. If we loosen this black knob on the back, we can make micro adjustments to that stop. By turning the silver knob on top, you can see there's a magnified micro adjustment feature. This not only has an imperial and metric scale, but allows you to make adjustments as small as 1/1000th of an inch, allowing you to nip off just a hair when you need to make some of those more precise cuts. But since this is a miter gauge, it's probably about time we talk about miters. But before we talk about miters, there is one issue that I want to discuss before we dive into the miter scale. And this has everything to do with how close that fence is to the blade. Now, even though the setup and calibration of this tool is incredible, once you take it out of 90, you'll see that that fence is going to interact with that blade. And because of this, in order to make miter cuts, you're going to want to unscrew the 2 knobs in back and move the fence away from the blade. So just be aware of this before you make any miter cuts. So just like with many miter gauges, this miter gauge allows you to rotate that fence from 0 to 65 degrees in both directions. And to be able to read your angle, there's a magnified scale right at the base of the tool. And to loosen and lock your angle into place, you simply twist the red knob on top. But if you're like me, you typically use the positive stops on miter gauges. Let's take a look at those. To disengage the stop, you simply pull back and press to the left or the right this silver tab in the back. With that silver tab to the side, you can freely rotate that miter gauge left or right. Once you're close to the angle you want, you'll simply depress that tab to the central position and then it will lock into place. Then you can secure it even further by twisting the red knob on top. And if we look at the side of the gauge, you can see there's a lot of these positive stops. There's actually 11 of them. And most of these are designated with a white diamond and include 90 degrees, plus or minus 60, 45, 35, 22.5, and 15 degrees. And that about wraps up all the features of this amazing Goingmake Miter Gauge, but we need to test it out, and I want to do 4 tests. For my first test, I want to cut a standard 90-degree cut. Let's do that right now. And if I take my square and put a flashlight behind it, you can see there's no daylight whatsoever. Next up, let's try a 45. And it doesn't get much better than that. And for the last couple of tests, I want to cut a couple of lengths. Let's first cut 12 inches exactly. And just so you know, off camera, I recalibrated this miter gauge so that I can make these straight cuts. And I'll have to say I'm very pleased with these results. And for our last test, I want to test out that extension wing and cut a piece of wood at 36 inches exactly. And that, once again, is just as accurate as that 12-inch cut. Well, it doesn't surprise me, but I'm once again super impressed with this new Goingmake tool. But this Goingmake tool is only the first of 4 tools we're taking a look at today. Our next tool is all about breaking down plywood. Speaking of breakdowns, that reminds me of back in the 70s when the lead singer of The Who had a mental breakdown. Yeah, the band wanted to have him committed, but when they took him to the mental institution, they just couldn't do it. They said that in the Bible it says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." This item is the Goingmake Parallel Guide System. Let's check it out. Let's first see how this thing was packaged. So once again, impeccable packing here, and everything has its own spot. Now that I'm pleasantly surprised with the packaging, let's take a detailed look at what's inside. And there really aren't that many pieces here. We have 8 laser engraved dual purpose tracks and scales. We also have 2 main body brackets, 2 narrow stock guides with rod stop, 2 flip stops, 12 T-track connectors, as well as some hardware. So if you haven't guessed already, this system is meant to be used in combination with a track from your track saw. And this parallel guide system is meant to be used with a variety of different brands, including all of these. But for my purposes, we're going to use this with a Festool track. Let's take a look at how we put this thing together. Now, as you saw earlier, this system comes with 8 pieces of extruded aluminum track. And these tracks are connected together in sequential order using the T-track connectors along with the bolts. Simply take your T-track, flip it upside down, and take 2 of your T-track connectors and slide 2 bolts into each connector. With the bolts inserted into 2 pieces of the T-track connectors, you can slide them into 2 pieces of track and tighten them down with the Allen key. And this is really where you can customize how long you want your tracks to be, whether you're using 1 piece of track, 2 pieces, 3 pieces, or even 4. And each piece is clearly labeled in the corner so that you know which order to put them in. And with all the pieces of track put together, we can now insert the main body brackets. To do this, we'll take a hex key and loosen up the 2 bolts on top of the body brackets. This will loosen up the T-track that's on back. Then we can take each piece, slide it into the end of the track, and tighten down both those bolts with the hex key. With our 2 main body brackets installed, we can slide it onto our track and tighten down the 2 hex keys on each body bracket onto the track. And we can make this even more secure by tightening down the 2 track connectors on the side. And with both guide rails attached to the track, your track should look something like this. Now it's time to add each flip stop to each parallel guide. The first thing that we want to do is to unscrew the silver knob on top. By doing this, you'll see it loosens up the bar on the bottom. You'll then take this bar and slide it into the end of each parallel guide. With the flip stop in place, you can see how easily they travel along that parallel guide. And with both of those stops in place, that just about covers the entire assembly of this tool. But now we need to talk about calibration. And just like with that miter gauge, calibration for this parallel guide is pretty easy. The first thing that we'll do is we'll grab the 2 narrow stock guides and screw them into each stop block with the included wrench. With both stock guides in place, it's now time to grab your favorite square. You'll then take your square and butt it up right against the blade guard of your track. And with our square in place, we can now take our stop block with that rod attached and butt up that rod right up against the square. And once that rod is touching that square, we can tighten down our stop block with the silver knob on top. And it's this position that should be our 0 point, but we need to calibrate it. And to do this, we're going to use this red magnified scale as well as this silver knob. By twisting the silver knob, you should be able to move the scale back and forth until it exactly hits 0. And just like that, everything should be fully calibrated. The only other thing that you could do is to remove those rods. Now let's dig into some of the features, and this one's got a lot of similar features that we saw with that miter gauge. Let's first look at the scale. As you can see, there's once again the white writing with black background that makes it very easy to read. And as you may have noticed, not only does it have a scale for imperial, but also metric, and you can do repeated cuts from 12 inches all the way up to 53 inches. And each of the stops on this parallel guide are really pretty amazing. Let's take a closer look at those. First off, you'll notice that the stops are rock solid and there's no play with either stop. Right below that stop, you'll also notice that there's 2 magnified windows. These allow you to easily read either imperial or metric on the top. You'll also notice on the top of the stop, there's ways to make micro adjustments. By loosening the black knob in front and turning the silver knob on the side, you can make micro adjustments as small as 1/1000th of an inch, which is an excellent way to make some of those small adjustments for some of your most precise projects. But let's do a couple of test cuts to see how accurate this thing is. Let's first do a longer cut at 46 inches exactly. So we'll slide both stops over to 46 inches and then we'll lock them down with the silver knob on top. Then we can slide our track down until both of the stops are resting right up against the edge of our plywood. And with everything in place, the only thing left to do is to make a cut with our track saw. Now let's remove that track, measure it up, and see how close we are to 46 inches. And that is spot on at 46 inches exactly. But let's try a smaller cut at its minimum of 12 inches. So just like before, we'll lock down our stop at 12 inches exactly. And with our blocks in contact with the edge of our plywood, we can go ahead and make our second cut. And just like before, let's take a quick measurement. And once again, we're spot on at 12 inches exactly. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm just as impressed with this parallel guide as I was with the miter gauge, and that's saying a lot. But we're not done yet, as we've got 2 more Goingmake items that we need to take a look at, and our next item also deals with the track. You wouldn't believe what happened at my stepson's track meet the other day. Somebody got shot with that starter pistol. They think it was race related. So I've taken a look at a few Goingmake rail squares over the last couple of years. One of the first ones I took a look at is their TS2 mini square. This smaller square provides a lot of support to your track with a smaller stature, which can be great if you're on the go and you just don't want to lug around a larger rail square. More recently, I took a look at their guide rail angle square. This square is an excellent option for creating angles with your track saw or even miters. And I would highly recommend either one of these options, but Goingmake just came out with a new rail square. This is the new Goingmake large track square. Let's check it out. So once again, Goingmake has excellent packaging with everything securely in place. But let's get it out of this box and see what we got. Inside the box, you're going to find the square guide itself, along with 2 extension rods and their associated depth collars. You'll also find a hex key. If we compare the design of this larger square to the mini square, you'll see the design is quite similar, with the larger square being about 3 inches longer. Let's take a look at some of the features that make this square work. If we look at the underside of the square, you'll notice there's a little lip at the top as well as the bottom. It's these lips that allow your square to perfectly cradle your workpiece, whether you use it at the top or the bottom of your wood. You'll also notice a little T-bar right on the front of the square. This is what slides right into your track. Once the 2 pieces are attached together, you can take the clip, slide it over the track, and clamp it into place. With the rail square in place, let's do a quick check to make sure this thing is actually at 90. And with my 12-inch square put right into place, you can see this thing is perfectly square. Now to square your track to your workpiece, you simply use one of the lips on the rail square and slide it up right up against your workpiece. But what if you want even more of a reference point? Well, that's where these 2 bench dogs come into play. If we look at the bottom of the square, you'll see that there's 6 threaded holes. And each one of these bench dogs has a screw top. Simply take the bench dog and screw it into 2 of those holes. And with those bench dogs in place, you can see that they provide an extra 3.5 inches of support. But what if you want to use those bench dogs in combination with an MFT style table? Well, this thing can handle that as well. To use it in this fashion, we'll simply take the 2 depth stop collars, slide them over the bench dogs, and tighten them into place. And since the 2 bench dogs are perfectly spaced, you can slide this square right into an MFT. And with the track attached and those depth stops raising the square, you can easily slide in stock like 3/4 inch plywood. Another interesting feature of this rail square are these 2 little cutouts on the top and the bottom. These cutouts allow you to engage a track clamp without interfering with the square. And probably one of my favorite things about this track square is its compatibility with the last tool we just looked at. If we look at the top of the square, you'll see that there's a T-bar right on top. We first want to loosen the 2 bolts on the back so that we can loosen this bar up. With that bar loosened, we can slide one of the arms of our parallel guide right on top. And once the bolts on the bottom are tightened back up, you really have a powerful tool with both of these items working in concert with each other. And for example purposes today, I used a Festool track, but all of these brands will work. But let's test this square out when being used in combination with that parallel guide. And I want to do a cut at 23 inches wide, and there's 2 things that I want to look for. The first thing that I want to check is the cut at 23 inches wide? And the second thing that I want to check is that corner square? So let's get started, make the cut, and see what the results are. Let's first check that measurement, and as you can see, we're banging out right at 23 inches exactly. Now let's grab that square and see if our corner's at 90. And that looks pretty darn good to me. And results like that, especially when using 2 precision tools together, is really pretty impressive. But we've got one more item to take a look at, and our next item is an interesting little gauge that might be a great addition for a table saw. Speaking of gauges, they say a guy's manhood is determined by the size of their feet. I guess that's why my stepdaughter keeps bringing home clowns. Our last item of the day is the Goingmake table saw gauge. Let's take a quick look. Now as I rip into this box, I'm once again seeing fantastic packaging with this item. And there really aren't a whole lot of pieces here. Let's take a look. Inside the box, you're going to get the dial indicator install bracket, the dial indicator, the slider bracket, as well as some hardware. To get this thing working, we'll simply slide the dial indicator into the install bracket. Then we can slide a screw in and tighten it up with an Allen key. With the dial indicator now installed, we can take the slider bracket and unscrew the metal knob on top. With the metal knob removed, we'll place the dial indicator right on top of that slider bracket and screw it into place. And that completes the entire assembly of the tool. Let's take it over to the table saw and slide it into the miter slot. Now for this item, you want the tool to be able to move up and down along the miter slot. However, you don't want it to move left and right. And the miter bar for this tool works in the same fashion as that miter gauge. You simply stick a hex key into one of the 2 bolts on top to adjust the miter tension. With that tension adjusted, we can now take a look at how this tool works. If we look at the tool, you can see there's once again 2 scales, one for metric and one for imperial. If we look at the very end of the tool, you'll see that there's 2 arrows, and as you can see, this tool will slide from 0 all the way up to about 4 3/4 of an inch. And you can lock this tool into any one of those measurements by simply twisting the silver knob on top. If we take a look at the top of the gauge, you can see you can adjust the scale by simply rotating the top. If we take a look at the end of the tool, you can see that that scale is drastically affected by a simple little tap. And this drastic change is due to its ability to be able to detect small variances. In fact, this thing is even accurate to 1/100th of a millimeter. So let me show you one quick way that this tool might be used. One way to use this tool is to detect a wobble in your table saw blade. First up, I'll take the gauge and slide it into position. With the gauge in position, we can then gently slide it forward until the tip gently touches that blade. Once we lock it into position with the silver knob, we can then rotate the dial so that the 0 is right at the dial. Then we can rotate that blade and get a sense of whether or not our blade needs to be adjusted. And in my case, I'm pretty pleased, as you don't see a whole lot of variance. And you can test this in multiple slots along that miter slot just to get a better confirmation. Well, that's going to wrap us up today. I'm once again super impressed with all of these Goingmake tools. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment, and share this video, as it truly does help. Also, if you haven't checked out my website, go to FlynnDoggWoodwork.com. There you can find all sorts of fun woodworking accessories like all the t-shirts that I wear in my videos. Lastly, if you'd like to support the channel, check out my channel memberships in the description below. There you get early access to all my videos as well as 1 member video a week. Until next time, take care as always. Here we go! Last Halloween, my friends wanted me to dress up as a propeller. At first I wasn't having it, but now I'm a huge fan. You know, I misplaced Dwayne Johnson's cutting tool for his origami workshop. I can't believe I lost rocks, paper, scissors. All right, you know, if I had to climb something and I had to choose between a rope with knots in it and 2 parallel boards with rungs on them, I'd choose the latter. All right, last try. Did you hear about that guy that got arrested for cutting off gang members' feet? Yeah, he heard it was profitable to sell cryptos.